My name is Jim Podolsky, and I'm going to give a talk tonight about what I call everyday mindfulness. So the word mindfulness gets used more and more these days, certainly more than back when I first started this practice. And it's used in a lot of different ways. So when I use the word, kind of a very simple and probably incomplete definition would be it's knowing what's happening as it's happening. So it's a present moment awareness practice. I'm curious, how many of you have taken some kind of mindfulness meditation class, whether it's an hour long or day long or a couple weeks? Okay, looks like most everyone has. Of course, I don't know about people who are online. So I thought I'd give a very, very brief description of mindfulness meditation as we teach it here at IMC. There's basically 4 postures that you can take for meditating: sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. We teach primarily sitting meditation since it's works the best for a group. And it really just consists of sitting down, taking an alert and upright posture, bringing some relaxation to the body, gently closing the eyes if you'd like, and then bringing the awareness to the breath, just noticing the sensation of the breath wherever in the body it's most accessible for you, where it's most noticeable. And so that's really the beginning of it, is just bringing the awareness to the breath, noticing it, noticing when the awareness wanders off, and just gently bringing it back. Over time, other experiences may arise. You may have bodily sensations that arise, and those, for the most part, you might just leave in the background and stay with the breath. If they become compelling, much more compelling than the breath, then you can bring your awareness to those bodily sensations. And when they're no longer compelling, come back to the breath. The other experiences that might arise are emotions, noticing when emotions arise. And again, if they're the most dominant experience, then you bring your awareness for a while to the emotion. Watch it as it arises and passes. And then likewise thoughts, all of the activities of all the mental activities, the planning for the future, the remembering the past, stories, fantasies, beliefs, opinions, letting your awareness go to them in a very conscious way, in a very intentional way. And then when they're no longer dominant, coming back to the breath. So in this 21st century Western insight way, we let the awareness rest on one of those 4 categories: the breath, the body, the emotions, or the thoughts. And the other characteristic is that we often decide ahead of time how long we're going to meditate. We usually set some kind of a timer for maybe 15 or 20 or 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour. and then just set the intention to just sit still and be with whatever arises until the timer goes off. And that's, I think, a very wonderful practice. It's very helpful to do it every day. Set aside, find some time to sit and meditate. On retreats, it's much more intense than that. Rather than just doing one sitting a day, you do an alternate between sitting meditation and walking, and sitting and walking. And then there's some meals in there. But again, mostly they're kind of fixed length. And of course, the retreat's fixed length. At the end of the retreat, you go back to your everyday life. The effects of either a daily sit or a longer retreat usually can last for some time, and eventually are no longer as noticeable. And during retreats, there's often an instruction after the first maybe 3 or 4 or 5 days to bring some more continuity to your practice. So rather than just sit and then stop meditating, get up, go back to your normal state of awareness, and then doing walking meditation and taking breaks between each one of those activities, the instruction is often to see if you can bring some continuity of practice between the sits and the walks and the sits, at least maybe for a couple hours, and see what that's like. I've had the opportunity to do that a number of times, and I often wish that I could do it differently, but my life was such, I was working. I was working to earn a living and pay my mortgage and everything else, so I couldn't go on retreat continuously. So I started to think, how can I develop this mindfulness in everyday life, off the cushion, off retreat. On the retreats, they sometimes say, well, when you go back into your daily life, you might find a few cues, a few things that might help you remember to pay attention. So for example, turning on and off light switches might be a cue to you to really notice what that's like, or going through doors. Ordinary things that we do every day that we could use as cues to just amp up the awareness, at least for momentarily. In the last few years, certainly since the pandemic, I live alone, and I've been doing a lot of my work remotely. So I actually do have a lot of I'm seldom really rushed or constrained in time. So I've started developing more and more ways of cultivating mindfulness throughout my day. So I thought I would walk you through a day in the life of Jim and point out some of the potential places where I can practice mindfulness. I'm not going to say that I do it all of the time and, I never miss a beat. There's plenty of gaps, but there's also many, many parts of my life that don't require a lot of interpersonal interaction or a lot of cognitive activity to try to figure out what I'm going to do. So my day starts with my waking up. And often waking up isn't just one, I don't just wake up and then that's it. I sometimes fall back to sleep. But eventually, there's one time that I wake up and it's, okay, it's time. And I tend to dream a lot. And so the very first thing I do is notice, was I just dreaming? What was going on in my mind just before I moved from unconscious to conscious? And oftentimes, I can remember something, like I can be aware that there were thoughts and images going on, even though I wasn't wide awake for them. Some psychotherapists think that there's a lot of meaning in dreams, and they encourage people to journal their dreams. And I used to do that in the 80s. Now, for me, I use it more as a kind of a mindfulness tool. That when I wake up, my first intention is to pay attention to what was just in my mind. And I find that by doing that, there is a little bit more energy that immediately comes up, a little bit more awareness, a little bit more focus. If I don't, then my mind is often or my awareness is kind of floating around, not quite sure where to land. So if I let it land on dreams, that immediately brings some focus to awareness. The next thing that I do after, or is not every morning, but most mornings, I do a short period of loving kindness. So even before I get out of bed, I just let whatever being or beings or people that come to mind, I say some phrases of well-wishing for them. May they be safe, may they be happy, may they be healthy, may they be tranquil. And I repeat those phrases, a number of times for one person, and then maybe someone else will come to mind, and I'll do that. And I don't set a timer for that. Usually I do at least 5 minutes of loving kindness, but sometimes it could be 30 minutes. And the value of that practice for me, number one, is it helps set an intention for the day. That I've noticed over the years that this mind is fairly prone to aversion, kind of finding what's wrong with this picture. So by doing loving kindness when I first wake up, there's it kind of shifts things so that the old patterns of thinking get challenged a little bit, and notice, oh yeah, well, there's a certain happiness from wishing well for others. So that not only helps wake up the mind and the awareness, but it helps wake up the heart. And it brings some energy to the body, and it sets an intention. And these are easy, this is pretty easy practice. I'm not sitting in on some cushion on a hard floor. I'm still in the nice warm bed until I decide to get up. And then when I get up, these days, the house is kind of cold. I leave the temperature at about 56. So So there's all sorts of sensation of the body, going from lying to sitting to standing, feeling the coolness of the air. And then from there, I go, and now that I'm woke up, I wake up my computer. I turn it on, and it takes a while to connect to the internet and do VPN and single sign-on and certificates and all sorts of things to get my work computer ready to talk to the world. And then I go in the kitchen to have breakfast. And that's quite an enjoyable experience. So let's see, I forgot one part I was going to say. When I talked about mindfulness meditation, the categories that I use for experience are, the breath, the body, emotions, and thoughts. What the Buddha taught is the four foundations for mindfulness are also the body, but also feeling tone. Is the experience you're having, is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Or is it neither pleasant or unpleasant? And then the third one was mind states, kind of the mood of the mind. Is the mind contracted or expanded? Is it irritable or is it happy? Is it kind of fuzzy or is it clear? And you can probably think of your own labels for the states of your mind that you find. But it's helpful to be able to recognize what's the mood in the mind right now. And then the fourth one is mental activities, thoughts, mental formations, much like the first list that I gave. So those are the four that the Buddha gave us. And so going back into the kitchen and back, preparing my breakfast, I always have oatmeal with blueberries and raspberries, pomegranate arrows, walnuts, a banana, and a dollop of Greek yogurt on the top. So it doesn't, it's kind of the same every day. So it doesn't take a lot of thought and planning. So I can just let that time be a time when I can notice, kind of notice, what's it really like to hold a bowl of hot oatmeal? What's it like to, slice the banana? And then sitting and eating. Eating meditation is one of the formal practices on retreat. They really encourage you to when you eat, just eat. Just notice all of the sensations. The taste, the texture, the smell, the visual of it, even the sounds like the spoon hitting the Corelle bowl. It's quite a sense experience. And if you just decide that you want to do this, you can just, kind of let everything else be in the background. All of the thoughts that my computer may have generated from looking at email, all my plans for the day, are still there, but they don't have to be what I'm attending to. What I can attend to is just this process of eating. I go back to the computer, look at email, some more, and also notice, how am I sitting? Like what's my posture like as I'm sitting at the computer? I find often that my shoulders tend to move forward and I hunch over. So I might make a decision to sit a little bit more upright. And then the next activity of the day is going to the bathroom and getting clean. So I use a water pick, floss, brush, gargle, shave with a safety razor. A lot of sense experience going on there. And to the extent that I can just let the rest of my thoughts and my plans relax a bit, then I can just notice what's it like. Is it pleasant when I'm shaving? Is it pleasant when I'm brushing my teeth? Just kind of letting whatever that simple activity is be the focus of awareness really makes a difference. And then, of course, taking a shower is kind of almost a body scan type mindfulness practice. Starting from the head and shampooing my hair, all the way down to my feet. The warm water that I use sparingly. The cold air when the warm water stops. And drying off, taking the towel. It's another whole body scan from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. It's very easy to do all of these things automatically and and kind of tuned out, like doing them and not really knowing that you're doing them. So I, many mornings, use kind of do shower meditation. Then get dressed, and feeling the cloth as it covers my upper body and lower body, and putting on my socks, and then going off for the day. That's going to work. There's several categories. I mean, one of the areas that I think is very important for mindfulness, and it's so important that I'm not going to try to cover it tonight, which is mindfulness of speech, or more generally, mindfulness of speech and mindfulness of listening. And more generally than that is mindfulness of communication, like really paying attention when you're talking to somebody, when you're listening to somebody, when you're reading an email or writing one, or a text or a letter. Those in some ways are sort of advanced mindfulness practice in my view. There's been a lot of talks given about that kind of thing. Just yesterday afternoon, there was an Eightfold Path class that was all on right speech. There's a teacher named Gregory Kramer who often holds workshops on insight dialogue, which is a way to really help bring more awareness to the way that we communicate with each other. So I won't say more than that about mindfulness of communication, but that's a very important daily practice. But the simple practices, the ones that don't don't take quite so much practice. The other ones for me are, my office is at one end of the building, and both the men's room and the break room are at the other end of the building. So when I get up to either go use the restroom or go to the break room to refill my water bottle, that's an opportunity to do sort of a mini walking meditation, to just allow myself to say, well, for this next couple of minutes that I'm walking down and back, I don't have to figure anything out. I don't have to compose an email or understand some obscure concept or figure out how I'm going to solve some problem. That I can just, for that few minutes, I can just take a break and notice what's it like to be walking. You know, the feeling in my feet, in my lower legs, maybe the breeze on my hands as I walk. Just getting in touch, getting in touch and staying in touch with the body. The other place that I practice mindfulness, at least some of the time, is driving. I'm kind of in an age now where my reflexes are slower than they used to be. So it's really crucial that when I'm driving, I'm just driving. I'm just paying attention to the road, to the car, to other drivers. I don't play music. I don't listen to talks. I don't have a hands-free telephone to talk to other people. I just drive. I just let the awareness, stay partly in the body and partly on the road ahead. I don't go on any really long drives. It's probably most everything that I do is within about an hour of where I live. So being mindful driving for an hour is not that challenging. I mean, as much as there's some desire for the mind to be entertained, entertained with music, or I'm not a big fan of talk radio, but Dharma talks or things like that. For however much time I'm in the car, I can just forgo that and just let that be a mindfulness practice. And then at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You brush my teeth, get into the pajamas that I wear, and then go to bed. So that's kind of a day in the life for me of the simple ways that mindfulness is accessible. When I decided to give this talk, I also happened to ask a number of friends of mine, people in Kalyana Mita groups, like, so how do you cultivate everyday mindfulness? What are your practices, or what are your cues to kick it up a notch? And one friend of mine, one person in the group, had talked about when they go out to the mailbox each day to get their mail. They just do that as sort of a mini or micro walking meditation. Now, the person didn't tell me whether once they get the mail, whether they start to read it on the way back or whether they just stay with the walking. I suspect that it's the latter. Or taking out the garbage. They take it to a dumpster. So again, it's one of those everyday things where you can just bring your awareness to the body, and also primarily to the body, but also to the feeling tone. Is this pleasant or unpleasant or neutral? You may also notice the mood of the mind or the thoughts in the mind. For many years, when I would drive up here on Monday nights to manage, the traffic on 101 would often be bad. And it almost never failed that I noticed that when I left work to head here, I was irritable. Then the mind was irritable. And by the time I left here, it was completely different. It was much more energetic, much more relaxed, much more tranquil. I'd often wondered, why couldn't my mind state have been different when I got in the car to come here? And I don't know. It could have been I hadn't eaten. It could just was kind of tired. But in any case, those are some of the things that I've come up with. Other people told me something that I thought I was kind of surprised at first, and then I realized that this made perfect sense, which was their cue for kicking up mindfulness was when they were suffering, when there was dukkha. It could be anything from as mild as just feeling like something is kind of off, feeling kind of awkward, I'm uncomfortable, dissatisfied, irritable, all the way to fairly intense pain. And they said when they noticed that, they realized, the response is to shift into a higher gear, awareness-wise. To bring more mindfulness, to bring more attention to what's going on. For me, it's not just attention, it's a particular kind, which is an attention which has kindness and curiosity, so that it's greeting the experience with a certain openness, and also some curiosity to want to know is there something going on here that I'm missing? So that sense of openness, of welcoming, and of wanting to be curious and investigate, I think are also important parts of a mindfulness that will help when things get tough. When things are challenging, when you're having not a nice, pleasant bowl of oatmeal, but when you're having an experience you just don't want to have. Like, no, not this. I don't want things to be this way. And for many, many years, and still to this day, although not as much, my instinct when unwelcome experience showed up was to try to somehow escape. How can I get out of this? Can I just physically get up and leave? Or can I just zone out? Can I ignore it? Can I distract myself? Can I distract others? Is there some delusion or some is there some other place in the imagination I can go so that I don't have to see what's happening? And after all the years that I've been alive, that never works. I mean, it might kind of work a little bit, but long term it never works. So developing an ability to be present in those times of challenge, in those times of suffering, in those times of experiencing the unwanted. Paying attention and meeting it can often be a much better approach than trying to make something go away. I have a friend that I talked to just recently who's subject to having migraine headaches. And they said that when the pain is real intense, the only thing that really helps is mindfulness, is just paying attention to the experience. Because what they told me was when they really paid careful attention, they found that it wasn't constant solid pain, that there were moments of relative ease that were interspersed with moments of intense unpleasant. And they found that there was actually sort of almost a wave nature to the pain that would kind of come and go and come and go. And by seeing that, it became easier to work with. That the mind wasn't trying to push it away, wasn't trying to escape. That it was actually possible to stay with that experience. And that over time, it dissipated. When I was told this story last night, there was no migraine operating. So cultivating mindfulness in everyday simple experience can give us a capacity to be able to be present when those much more challenging experiences arise. So it isn't, cultivating mindfulness in itself isn't the ultimate goal. It's really developing mindfulness so that we can see more clearly what's going on and respond to our experience in a more wise and beneficial way. So there's a way that I think practicing mindfulness can be beneficial in the moment, and it can be beneficial as the challenges in life present themselves to us, which they always will. I don't know that I've ever met anybody who hasn't faced challenges. So thank you all for listening. If anyone has any questions or might want to share their experience of mindfulness, Sally, could you give him the...
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. You mentioned that there's times, of course, where you're not mindful. Do you find that happens by accident, out of weakness, or do you find that you make a decision, now I am going to opt for entertainment rather than mindfulness, and how do you make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure that I ever consciously decide not to be mindful, but but it happens. I'd say mindlessness happens. And I don't think there's anything wrong with entertaining the mind. I don't have a television. My television broke during the pandemic, and I just decided not to get a new one. But I have the internet, and so I listen to music from my youth, from the 60s and 70s. And some of those songs are they just bring up a lot of memories, a lot of emotion, and I think that those are fine to enjoy. I don't think that the practice is about some real strict asceticism of, sitting in a cave and all your life. I'd say that there's still some mindfulness operating when I do those things, like listen to old music or watch old movies, which is seeing that they can't be clung to. I can listen to a song that I really like, and then I might listen to it again and again. And after a while, it's like, well, songs end, and often they end in just a few minutes. So being able to enjoy and not cling is maybe the practice to do in those situations. Yeah, I don't know. Have you had an experience of consciously dropping awareness?
If I have a long drive, sometimes I will drive mindfully and try to pay attention to my hands on the wheel, and sometimes I'll listen to a podcast, or if I've had maybe a difficult experience, like a hard day at work or something, I feel like I don't have capacity for mindfulness at that time.
Yeah. Well, I don't want any of the practices that I described to be presented as this is what you should be doing. These are just opportunities. This is something that you might want to try. Yeah. So thank you. Okay, well, it's 9:00, so thank you all for coming. I hope if any of this is helpful for you, please take it with you, and if it's not helpful, just let it go.